The story unfolds on an oil rig. Rose, a company representative, brings a new shift schedule while playfully responding to Baz's jokes, a guy whose shift is about to end. Magnus, the head of the oil rig, contacts the mainland and learns that the helicopter is delayed as all available aircraft have been sent to evacuate workers from another rig. Baz continues to joke around, but one of his colleagues disappoints him by revealing that he's not on the departing list. His seat was given to Fulmer, who was trying to contact the mainland at that moment. At this point, the station loses communication. Magnus gathers everyone and informs them that the departure will have to wait. The workers demand to know an exact time, but the boss is unable to answer. The meeting is interrupted by power outages. The workers are ordered to head up to the lifeboats. Magnus and Rose head to the control room and see the sensors showing a sharp pressure increase. At that same moment, the boss notices that the nearby platform is on fire, but there's no way to contact it. Tremors begin on the station, and Alvin warns Magnus that everything could explode. Meanwhile, Rose pressures Magnus, reminding him that shutting down the drilling will result in financial losses. Nevertheless, the boss orders the system to be shut down. Power is restored, but communication remains down. Fulmer hands Magnus a portable radio, which can be used to call for help. The workers are given the all clear, and Hatton stirs up trouble, telling younger colleagues that it was all just a drill to end the meeting and avoid extra work. At that moment, the platform starts shaking. Magnus tries to call for help, but he is distracted by a terrifying sight that the other workers also witness. Thick fog is approaching the installation. Magnus decides to send the repair crew to the tower to check the satellite system. The task is assigned to Fulmer and Baz. Magnus promises Baz his seat on the helicopter if he manages to restore communication. Baz climbs up first, and at some point, a seagull startles him, causing him to nearly fall. On top, the two men have a conflict, but they manage to resolve it and check the satellite. Fulmer descends first, while Baz lingers and notices a dying seagull on the ground. Magnus and Hatton wait below for Baz to come down, but for some unknown reason, the guy falls from the tower. While medics attend to Baz, Rose brings Magnus to the control room and shows that not only has their station stopped working, the entire oil pipeline has shut down, and there's no communication with the mainland. Kat tells Hatton that Baz has no chance without a hospital, and even though she blames herself for inaction, Hatton attacks the doctor, earning a kick to his bad leg. Night falls, and Alvin stays with Baz but fails to notice when the guy regains consciousness. Hatton causes another scene in Magnus's office, and the boss leaves to avoid conflict. Left alone, Hatton notices an interesting document on Magnus's desk. Chaos erupts in the corridors, and Alvin leaves Baz to find out what happened. Denlin asks the boss to come up to the helicopter pad. Hatton tells everyone that he found a document about the station's imminent closure, and Magnus admits that the team will soon be laid off. During the boss's speech, ash flakes begin to appear in the air, and Baz ascends the stairs toward his colleagues. Sometime later, Baz wakes up in the medical ward. He tries to remember what happened on the tower, and suddenly he has a fit, warning that a wave is approaching. Kat tells Rose that Baz's recovery is suspiciously fast, and while no one is looking, deep cuts on the guy's body begin to heal on their own. The team notices a signal coming from a nearby ship. Lek goes up to the deck to receive the message, which indicates that help is on the way. Baz tries to check himself, but he's hindered by visions of a giant wave destroying the station. Everyone believes this is impossible, and the height of the platform will protect them, but Alvin recalls a historical instance of a similar tsunami. Baz's condition worsens, and he coughs up a gold tooth. The rescue ship approaches the station, but Rose tries to convince Magnus to stay, warning that abandoning the station would cause the company to suffer losses. The boss postpones the conversation, as Kat informs him that Baz has disappeared. Alvin finds Baz, who now realizes something is wrong with him. He tells his older colleague that they won't be able to escape the station. Lek undresses to take a shower and notices that his body is covered in blood. At the same time, Hatton escapes from his cabin through the window. Heather finds Lek on the floor and informs the management. Magnus and Rose arrive at the scene. Alvin and Fulmer notice a new signal from the bridge, and the men decide to check the deck together. Lex's tattoos begin to disappear from his body, and when Kat finds Baz's tooth in the cabin, the team realizes that after contact with the ash, the body is rejecting all foreign matter. Rose intends to test the ash for biological components, while Fulmer checks the lifeboats and accidentally cuts his hand. The men notice someone signaling an SOS with flashlights, and the rescue ship is urgently sailing toward the station. They try to enter, but Hatton has blocked the doors, and Alvin leaves to find another way in. Hatton activates the evacuation signal, and panic breaks out on the base. Magnus notices that Alvin is looking for Baz and hasn't returned to the module, meaning he'll be swept away by the wave when the ship gets closer. Denlin volunteers to go after his friend. Alvin finds Baz and begs him to return to the others, but Baz insists he must witness life emerging from the water. Baz grabs Alvin by the throat, causing the man to start choking as if he's underwater. Magnus arrives and tries to save his friend, but it's no use. The rescue ship turns around and leaves without explaining why. Rose examines the ash, and when she drops a bit of blood onto a slide, she sees that it brings strange parasites to life, which she shows to Magnus. Meanwhile, the station chief crosses out the names of his fallen friends from the list. He meets with Rose, and she tells him she plans to take blood samples from the entire team to identify the infected. The fog clears, revealing the nearby platform is burning. Hatton suggests chasing the rescue ship in the lifeboats, but Denlin realizes there isn't enough fuel to reach it. Fulmer finds Baz in the lab, where the guy has discovered the test results. Rose notices that Baz stole samples of his blood, but she doesn't manage to get them back. Magnus decides to isolate Fulmer, remembering he had a cut. The boss gathers everyone in the hall and announces a deck cleanup and the formation of a search team to bring Baz back. At the same time, Baz throws his blood samples into the water and stands under the deck irrigation system. Denlin ends up in the same room as Hatton, and the old man continues to sow discord among the team. Baz approaches the oil tanks and, waving his hand over them, causes all the liquid to freeze in place. Rose finds the research results, showing that similar spores from the ash have appeared in previous reports, and each time fossils with these spores were found before mass extinction events. The last known mass extinction was in the Permian period, the very time when the oil they are drilling was formed. Gorell finds the tanks while searching for Baz and tries to call his colleagues, but by the time Hatton and Denlin get to him, he's already lying on the floor, wounded after an encounter with Baz. Denlin asks his friend to open his hand, revealing metallic fillings that had started to fall out of Gorell's mouth. Baz begins to tremble, and the station loses power again, but Rose insists they continue working. Magnus decides to release Fulmer so he can fix the problem. Heather sees Baz. Standing near the oil tanks, he watches algae covering them and tells her his mission is to protect this place. Gorell appears next to Baz, trying to approach, but Hatton comes to Heather's aid, and she manages to escape. Fulmer restores power, but the team notices that the gas flare on the tower has gone out, which could lead to an explosion or poison the entire crew. Automatic ignition fails, and Denlin suggests lighting it manually. Fulmer volunteers to light the flare, realizing he's probably infected anyway. The team lines up to support him, and Denlin transports him as close as possible with a crane. Fulmer unhooks his safety harness to get closer. He manages to light the flare, but the flames hit him, and he falls unconscious. Denlin asks Heather to take over at the control panel and goes to his cabin to write a farewell letter to his family. Baz is convinced that to save everyone, he must shut down the main oil pipe, but this can only be done at its base. Rose leaves Fulmer, and meeting Heather and Kat in the hallway, the girls discuss the life form discovered on the planet. Kat confesses to her friends that she's very scared because she's pregnant. Fulmer overhears the women's conversation as he leaves the ward. Magnus has a vision of his deceased son, but he can't bring himself to tell his friends. The team gathers in the lab to discuss what's happening, but Fulmer doesn't participate in the debates. Sitting in the corner, he draws the same circles that Baz recently sketched. Magnus gathers everyone in the control room. Pressure on the rig is skyrocketing, and the team sees on the monitors that Baz is trying to open the well. They can't remotely stop the guy, so Magnus orders the manipulator to shut off the wellhead. Esther lowers the equipment, and the team sees strange circles on the seabed that weren't there before. The manipulator shuts off the wellhead, thwarting Baz's plan. Thinking hard, Baz realizes that only Fulmer can help them, and they need to force him to do it. While the team debates their next steps, communication is restored on the base. Magnus sends Fulmer to the control room to contact the shore. Kat immediately calls her friend, who shows her that the fog is approaching them. The doctor tries to warn her not to go outside, but the call is cut off again. Magnus also can't confirm if the Coast Guard received his help signal. Rose notices the circles Fulmer has drawn. He also realizes that something strange is happening to him. The burns on his body start to heal before his eyes. Baz's voice appears in Fulmer's head, asking for help. Dropping the radio, Fulmer runs away. Magnus gathers everyone for an emergency meeting, but Rose leaves to look for her friend. She finds Fulmer in the shower and tells him she's figured out he's infected too. She hugs her boyfriend, and he has a vision of her suffering. Arguments erupt in the hall, and a fight breaks out between Hatton and Kat. To protect her friend, Heather reveals Kat's secret. Magnus breaks down, and Rose sends him to his cabin to rest. Rose goes to Fulmer, but only finds a note. Kat, who went outside to calm down, sees Fulmer heading to Baz's bunker. The doctor follows him and enters a compartment covered in thick vegetation. As soon as Kat steps inside, strange glowing organisms start swirling around her belly. The team notices approaching lights. Everyone is sure they'll be evacuated soon, but Rose decides not to call Magnus yet. As they gather on the deck, they realize it's just a lifeboat from the nearby station. Rose believes they should rescue the survivors, but Hatton insists they have enough problems of their own, and the guests could bring new trouble. The lifeboat contains one of the company's managers, David Koch, who demands to be taken to the control room, but Rose insists on a medical check. Harish, a guy from the other platform, tells his colleagues that things started getting strange after they began testing new equipment on Koch's orders. Magnus goes to the medical bay and asks Kat for forgiveness for his outburst. Fulmer heads to the compartment where Baz has been calling him all this time. Meanwhile, Magnus tries to find out from Rose what happened to her friend and what Koch wants. She tells the boss about the circles and admits she doesn't know what to do next. Heather tries to find Koch in the station's database, but the computer says such an employee doesn't exist. Magnus also starts to suspect something after his conversation with the strange man. Heather tells her friends what she's learned, and Esther asks Harish to check which files the stranger accessed before arriving at the station. While examining the rings, Rose finally realizes that they're a form of measurement, like tree rings. Her thoughts are interrupted by Koch, who has come to her lab with Magnus. Fulmer finds Baz and Gorell, and they tell their colleague that he must help them stop the program and open the wellhead. Koch finds a group of workers trying to rebel, and he convinces them to help him, promising in return to save the station so they won't lose their jobs. The crew's task is to pump compressed gas into the fire suppression system, which will safely knock out the infected so Koch can access the pump controls. Heather and her friends discover that Koch knew about the strange organisms before arriving at the station. Fulmer figures out the equipment, but he realizes that Baz and Gorell are planning to destroy everything. Koch manages to convince the team, and they head to the storage area, confident that he'll help them escape once the job is done. Taking the cylinders, Denlin realizes it's not just carbon as the visitor claimed, but Hatton insists on completing the task, hoping to return home alive. Hatton connects the gas, but when Gorell approaches the group, they realize that the substance doesn't stun him, it kills him. Along with the guy, the plants die too. Fulmer tries to shut off the system but collapses by the control panel. Watching the events unfold on screen, Koch locks the doors, leaving his hired hands behind. Kat, noticing this, tries to help her colleagues, but it's too late. Denlin falls before Hatton's eyes, and the man realizes it's his fault. Magnus opens the doors, and Rose goes searching for Fulmer. She finds Denlin's body by the exit, followed by her boyfriend. At first, it seems there's no hope of saving him, but when the plants begin to revive, Fulmer opens his eyes too. Hatton blames himself for his friend's death, but Magnus tries to calm him despite their past conflicts. Fulmer and Rose manage to get out, and the guy tells his girlfriend that something is trying to communicate with them. They just aren't listening. While the team gathers to confront Coke, a circle on the seabed closes. 2 days before the events on the neighboring platform, Coke tested new equipment, which caused the explosion. Harish also tells Magnus that Coke abandoned more than 20 survivors on the platform. Magnus summons Coke and admits that it's all about extracting the maximum amount of oil. The owner ordered them to pump out every last drop and destroy the entity that was preventing them from doing so. He assures Magnus that this is the only way to save humanity. Otherwise, the ash will cover the entire world. The boss tells Rose everything, but she asks him not to rush and give her and Fulmer time to find another solution. Harish tells Esther that Coke knows how to get back to the mainland, and the guy tries to get details from someone in Hatton's crew. But the man refuses to talk about Coke, who betrayed them. Fulmer manages to glimpse inside Baz's mind and sees his visions, where the entity triggers a landslide that wipes out all life on Earth. Rose insists that they must negotiate with the mysterious force, but Magnus believes it needs to be destroyed. The boss goes to Coke and says he's ready to cooperate. Another argument flares up within the crew, and Magnus finally agrees to try, and, leaving Coke behind, the team heads to Baz. Coke again tries to sabotage Magnus, and feeding Harish a story about a helicopter coming for him soon convinces the guy to help him. The group finds Baz, but he tells his colleagues it's already too late. The entity has disconnected him. Harish realizes that Coke intends to blow up the rig with all its inhabitants. The guy forces the conspirator into a candid conversation and turns on the microphone so everyone else can hear his words. The station starts shaking. Coke activates the system meant to destroy the oil field. Harish's friends try to stop him, but the man flees when he hears the helicopter has arrived for him. Coke reaches the helicopter pad, but Hatton is there waiting for him. The old man is about to take revenge on the visitor for Denlin's death, but at the last moment, he decides to leave it to justice. Rose tries to communicate with the strange force, and meanwhile, a tsunami begins to form on the seabed. Hatton orders an evacuation. He decides to wait for Magnus, who, at that moment, is trying to convince Baz to leave with them, but the guy chooses to stay and protect the ancient entity. Kat, Hatton, and Heather board the helicopter, watching the approaching tsunami. Magnus, Rose, and Fulmer also manage to jump on at the last moment. The machines lift off, and everyone hopes to return home, but Coke hints that the wave will wipe everything out and their helicopters are heading in the wrong direction. This marks the end of the miniseries. Friends, leave your comments about what you think of the show.